Namaste friends, I hope you are doing fine. What happens when you have a lot of files created in Excel and you must refresh the data in each of them individually on a daily, weekly or monthly basis? Let me demonstrate with an example. This is a file which I have to open on a daily basis. Click on the data menu and click on refresh all. This will refresh the data that is present in the Excel file through Power Query. You will see the amount of time it is taking to refresh this data. And now, once it is refreshed, I'll click on Save and I'll close this file. Let's consider this piece of puzzle as an Excel file and a part of a report. We spend 5 minutes daily to refresh this file. There are different processes in a company and each process will have some report requirements. For example, the HR team, IT team, sales team, operations team, etc. Over a period, business requirements change and so does the number of reports. Multiply it with the number of processes and it will return a huge number. Hence, over time, the data will increase and so will the time to refresh it. This will consume most of your time if you happen to open each file and refresh the data within it. As a result, you will spend less time in value-adding activities within the stipulated shift time in offices. It would be better if these data refresh tasks are scheduled to run automatically with the same level of accuracy as manual refresh. I am Subhojit, and in this video tutorial, we will explore an underrated tool used to automate data refresh in Excel and save a lot of time. Let's quickly check the requirements for automating a data refresh. The first requirement is setting up Excel files with Power Query connected to the data source of your choice. It will facilitate pulling records in Excel, cleaning data if required, applying joins and appends, adding calculations, etc. You will find videos on my channel explaining details on how to set up Power Query in Excel. I will also leave some links in the description. The second requirement is VBA. It stands for Visual Basic for Applications. It is an implementation of Microsoft's event-driven programming language, Visual Basic 6.0. VBA can be used to write programs for the Windows operating system and runs as an internal programming language in Microsoft applications such as Access, Excel, PowerPoint, Publisher, Word, and Visio. The third requirement is Task Scheduler. It is a built-in tool in Microsoft Windows that allows you to schedule tasks to run automatically at specified times or intervals. You can use Task Scheduler to automate tasks such as running scripts or programs. We will use it to schedule data refresh in Excel. The fourth requirement will be unfolded towards the end of the video. Before we proceed, you can help me boost my confidence. Please like the video if you like the video. You can subscribe to the channel to get notified on new content. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Share the video with your friends and colleagues. Let's get started. Our first step would be to enable the developer menu in Excel. For that, We will click on File, Options. Under Excel Options, I'll go to Customize Ribbon. Under Customize the ribbon, we will find the Developer tab. I'll click on the checkbox and click OK. The Developer tab will now be visible in the Excel bar, and once I click on it, it will show me all the available tools within it. Our second step would be to enable macros. For that, I'll click on the Developer tab. Within it, I'll click on Macro Security. This will take me to the Trust Center window, and under Macro Settings, I'll have to enable VBA macros by clicking on this radio button, and then I click on OK. Our next step is to record a macro. But before that, let me resize this window so that you can see the steps that are being recorded. I'll click on the Developer tab, and I'll click on the Visual Basic Editor button. This will open the Visual Basic Editor. On this window, there are a few components which we should be aware of. One of them is the project subpane, which appears on the left. And these are the objects within the Excel workbook. Every sheet is an object, every workbook is an object, every cell within this is an object which we can programmatically control through the Visual Basic Editor. Now, there is a button on the Developer tab called Record a Macro. I'll click on it, and it will ask me for some details. The first is the name of the macro that I am recording, a shortcut key which will be assigned to the macro so that I can invoke it easily later on. This is similar to Control C shortcut or Control V shortcut that we use in copying and pasting data. You can assign any letter of your choice, but you need to know that if you use Control plus C over here in this window, the next time you use Control C when this workbook is open, it will always invoke the macro and not the copy action, which is the default for Excel. You need to be very, very careful when you are assigning the letters to the shortcut key. The next one is store macro in. So I'll leave it to this workbook, but you can store the macro in any workbook that you want. But the moment you store a macro in a workbook, the extension of the workbook changes from .xlsx to .xlsm. That you will see that when we will save this particular workbook. And you can add a small description to it. I'll leave the name of the macro as macro1. I don't want to change it. I'll leave the other settings as they are and click on OK. The moment I click on OK, there is a small button which appears and it shows a macro is currently recording. Click to stop recording. I don't want to stop the recording because I've just started it. So what I'll do is I'll click on File, and I'll click on the file that I want to open. So this is the file that I want to open and refresh. I'll just move it to the left. And now when I see the Visual Basic Editor window, I see that we have both the workbooks open. The one in which we were recording the macro and the one in which I have to refresh the data. Now the book one where I was recording the macro, there is one extra folder which is added called modules, and I click on the plus sign and I'll see a module within it. I'll double click on it, and over here you will see that the macro has recorded some lines. The first line is to open the file, and the path of the file is given over here. And I moved the window to the left, and so it got recorded as well, but we can remove these lines from the code. Now the next step that I would like to do is to refresh the data that is present in the all price file. So I'll click on data and I'll click on refresh all, or I can press Ctrl plus Alt plus F5 to refresh all. Over here you will see that I had clicked on C3, therefore range C3 dot select line has been added to the code. You can remove all these extra lines later. I'll show that. Now the refresh is complete, and you will see that in the macro window or the Visual Basic window, a line is added called active network dot refresh all. Now I would like to save after the refresh is completed. So it has added active workbook dot save. The final step is to close this particular file. There you go, active window dot close. So we have recorded our first macro, and now we will beautify the code and add some more lines to it, which are simple, and I'll explain them as I will add them. Before moving forward, I would like to save this macro so that the recording doesn't get lost. In the Save As window, I'll click on Macro Enabled Workbook option, and I'll name this as refresh. You can name this file according to your requirement. We always need to remember that this process is automated, right? So we create a file and we let it refresh the data continuously till the next time there is a change, right? So 2 to 3 months down the line, when you would want to make any changes, you should be aware of which file you have to target. So based on that, you should name these files accordingly. I'll click on save. And now the file is saved with the name of refresh and an extension of .xlsm. Let us clean the code now. I'll maximize the Visual Basic Editor window, and I'll select these 3 extra lines, press delete. Similarly, I'll delete it for these. So now we have the lines which will open the file, refresh the queries, save the file, and close the file. Now we will need to ensure that Excel doesn't lose focus when executing the code, which means any system generated messages should not appear on screen wherein a manual input is required. For that, I'll add one line on top, which is application.display alerts equal to false. So application is the Excel application, and like I said, when you are programming, every component is an object. So since Excel application is an object, I can go ahead and disable the system generated messages so that the execution of the code takes place smoothly. Now, whatever I will disable at the start of the code, I will enable it at the end of the code, which means I'll come over here, and after I will add the line application.display alerts. This time the value should be true. So false means it is disabled and true means it is enabled. Another point which we should focus on is while the code is executing or a refresh is taking place, Excel should not go ahead and save the file, because the moment you try to save the file, the query will not refresh. It will stop in between and try to save the file, which we do not want. So after refresh all, I will enter one more line, which is application.calculate until async query is done. What this will do is it will wait for the queries to be refreshed and then it will go ahead and save the file. Since we have only a query in this particular Excel file, active workbook.refresh all is kept once. But in case if you have queries as well as some pivot tables which are supposed to showcase some analysis on the report, then you will have to repeat this particular line in the code. So what I'll do is I'll paste the line once again. So the code will now refresh all the queries that are there in the workbook using the first option or first line, and the second line will refresh the pivot tables in the workbook after the queries are refreshed. So the query gets refreshed, then the pivot tables gets refreshed, and then the workbook is saved, and finally the workbook is closed. Before testing this code, I just have one more step to perform. I'll go to Excel. I'll open the file that I'm supposed to refresh, that is all price. I'll click on data, queries and connections. And all the queries that are listed over here, I have to right click on each, click on properties and disable enable background refresh option over here. So I just uncheck this, click on OK. That's it. I'll have to do this for each of the queries over here, and I'll tell you the reason in a moment. The reason to disable the option enable background refresh is the moment you open the Excel file, it will try to refresh the queries in the background. And you have a VBA code which is trying to refresh that particular query again. So one request will clash with the other request and the data would not refresh at all. And therefore, you need to disable the option enable background refresh for all the queries that are present in your workbook. So once I have unchecked the enable background refresh option for all the queries, I'll save the file and I'll close it. I'll go back to the Visual Basic editor, and over here I see a play button and I'll click on it. This will execute the query. So now the file is opened, it is getting refreshed, and the file is closed. One thing we need to understand over here is after the code executed, Excel remained open. We need to close Excel as well after the code is executed. So I'll add one more line after active window.close, and that is application.quit. We are telling the Excel application to close off after refreshing the file. Now I'll save this and I'll hit the play button once again. This time it will open the file, refresh it. So it's refreshing now. Saving it and closed the Excel window. A best practice would be to comment the code so that in future you come back to this and you will remember what the line did. comment starts with a single quote and it looks something like this. So disable system messages is a comment for the line application.display alerts equal to false. A typical piece of code will look like this. The lines highlighted in green are comments, and the lines which are in black are the actual pieces of code. This will help you remember what you had written after a period of time. So we have created the macro, tested it, and it is working fine. Now I'll rename this particular macro name. So by default it was macro 1. I'll rename it to refresh underscore all price. The next thing that I would like to do is whenever I open this file, this macro should trigger automatically. Currently, I am clicking on this play button to execute this macro. I don't need it like that because the task scheduler will run this in an automated manner. So I'll double click on this workbook in the project pane. And in this particular drop down, I'll select workbook. And the default action which is selected in the next drop down is open. You have a lot of actions which are listed over here, which you can select and program them. So on the workbook open event or action, I would like to call my macro, which is in module 1. So the syntax is call and the name of the macro, and this will ensure that whenever the workbook opens, this macro is executed without fail. I'll save this. Let's test it. I'll double click on the refresh.xlsm file. Excel is opening, and now you will see that the macro is getting executed because it is connecting to the data source so that Power Query can refresh. Let's see this in action once again. So it's saved and it closed Excel as well. Now we will try to create a task in the task scheduler which will invoke Excel and the refresh file. So for that, I will type task scheduler in the Windows address bar, and once I get the result, I'll click on the task scheduler app. So this is the task scheduler app which opened on my screen. On the right hand side under actions, I see create basic task. I'll click on it. The create basic task will open, and on the left hand side you can see create a basic task, trigger, action, and finish. So first of all, we will name this particular task. Again, you will have to name it in such a way that somewhere down the line I should be able to remember that this particular task will do this, and it will be very helpful while troubleshooting as well. I can add a small description to it, but as of now, I'll click on next. And this is where I can define when the task will run. So I need this task to run daily. I'll click on next. Now it should run at around 4:30 p.m. India time. So I'll type 4:30 p.m. and it should recur every 1 day. Now over here you can decide, like based on your requirement, you can run it every 1 day, every 2 days, 1 week, 1 month, and those options are already available over here. I'll click on next. And what is the action you want to perform? I want to start a program. The program is Excel. And therefore, when I click on next, it will ask me where is the program residing on your computer. For that, I'll click on start. I'll right click on the Excel icon, more, and open file location. So this location has taken me to the shortcut of Excel. Now what I'll do is I'll right click on the shortcut and click on properties. In the target box, you will find the path for Excel application. I copy it and I'll paste it in program/script box. Now this will open Excel. Now I have to tell Task Scheduler where does the file reside which will open in Excel. For that, I'll copy the path of the folder and I'll add it as an argument. There should be 2 double quotes over here. And within those 2 double quotes, I'll paste the path of the folder /refresh.xlsm. I'll click on next. So it will give you a summary. The name is refresh underscore all price. When does it trigger? Every day at 4:30 p.m. And what is the action that it is doing? It is starting a program and opening this particular file. I'll click on finish. And now this task is appearing in the task scheduler library. If I want to test it, I would right click on it and click on run. Now in the taskbar, you will see that Excel will open. Here it is. And again, it is like doing the same thing, connecting to the data source. It will refresh Power Query. I'm not clicking anywhere. I've just hovered the mouse pointer on those icons in the taskbar. So it refreshed the file, closed the file, and exited Excel. You can schedule a lot of files for refreshing the data within it using this simple trick. Any point of time, if you want to change the timing or change the frequency of refresh, or say if the path of the file has changed, you come over here in Task Scheduler, right click on the task, click on properties, and you can click on these tabs, triggers, actions, and make those particular changes. So when you click on triggers and click on edit, you can come here and you can change the frequency from daily to weekly or monthly. You can change the timings. You can change the recurrence and click OK. In actions, you can come and change the path of the file and click OK and OK. So this is how we can automate the data refresh process on Excel files using Power Query, VBA and Task Scheduler. Now comes the final piece of the puzzle. Task Scheduler can be configured on a laptop or a desktop, but it should be logged in for the task to be executed. You can start your laptop or desktop and log in at least 15 minutes prior to the time set for task execution. An alternative will be to put the task scheduler on AWS server. The benefit of AWS server is you can leave it logged in through remote desktop connection app on Windows. I hope this video added another tool to your data analysis toolkit. We will meet again in another exciting video very soon. Stay tuned, bye bye, and take care.